welcome to the second episode of the Fall Webinar series. Now, this is a series of webinars focused on professional skills development. I'm Hasla Dharmardana. I'm the IEEE Region 3 Young Professionals Lead, and I'm your host today. In this webinar, we bring to you an Oscar winning entrepreneur to share his thoughts about entrepreneurship. Now, before we start, a few housekeeping instructions. Now, the most important instruction, rule, I would say, is that you should ask questions without any hesitation. There is no wrong question, there is no bad question, there are just all good questions. And not just questions we would like to hear from you, your thoughts, your comments, your feedback, just feel free. However, when you are putting in your stuff on the chat box, make sure you 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 in the in the drop down, make sure it is all panelists. You could also make it all attendees, but at least make it all panelists so that both of us, the host and the presenter, can see your um, chat. Now, before you write your questions, I would like to ask you to identify yourself. Now, this is not mandatory, but if you could write your name, your IEEE section, and if you're an IEEE volunteer leader, what your position is, if you are, that would be really nice. Now, at the end of the presentation, I will be cutting and pasting your questions onto a shared Google Doc, which Richard also has access to. And we will collate your questions and I will read out verbatim as much as possible for Richard to answer your questions at the end of the presentation to ensure that we have a smooth flow. Saying that, it's now time to introduce our speaker. So our speaker today is a professional manager and an engineer with extensive international and industry experience. In fact, he had a career, I guess it's his starting point, a career of 27 years with Hewlett Packard. His background covers a wide variety of technologies that include semiconductor process development, semiconductor device development, semiconductor imagers, lasers, hardware design, and physical electronics as well. He got his graduate and postgraduate degrees at the University of Minnesota, Colorado State University, Stanford Business School, Babcock College, and the University of Northern Illinois. Now, besides his R&D work and his management work, he has been a CEO of an international startup. And now for the IEEE folks out there, this is going to be interesting. He's been an active member of IEEE for over 37 years and also is a member of Eta Kappa Nu, which is the honor society of IEEE. So 37 years in IEEE makes him a life senior IEEE member. On the front of entrepreneurship and inventions, he holds 6 patents personally, sits on 2 board of directors, and has his own company called Testera LLC, which is a small consulting and design firm focused on high-tech product development for specialized applications. He's the principal author on seven publications and an angel investor in 3 companies. Now, recently, he has been recognized for one of his camera adaptations that have been successfully installed on the International Space Station, and another camera that has been used by NASA in the world's largest parachute test. In 2018, he was awarded the Outstanding Individual Achievement by IEEE Region 5. And now on his entrepreneurial work on with IEEE and with the other outreach activities, he was the pioneering chair of the IEEE President's Forum in 2018. He started it. And he's the current director of the Engineer in Residence program at the Colorado State University's ECE program. His achievements are many, but one that is most interesting to me and perhaps to all of you is that he won an Oscar award. Now, how many engineers do we know who won an Oscar award for acting? No, I was just joking. No, this is not for acting, but it's for engineering work. So he is a recipient of the 2012 Academy Award, Oscar, for technical development of the Phantom high-speed camera. And he also won an Emmy in 2011, in addition to other awards he got through because of his professional achievements. A little bit about himself. On his volunteering side, he thoroughly enjoys working with smaller organizations and passionate about helping new businesses succeed, which is why he makes the perfect presenter here today. Talk to you about how to start your own companies and about the myths and how to succeed in this very difficult field, I'd say. Very competitive. So, folks, it's my pleasure to give to you our presenter for today, Richard Toughness. Richard, over to you.
Jeez, thanks. So, wow. Yeah, I did not win the Oscar for acting, definitely. Okay. Um, Everybody hear me okay at this point? Today, what we're going to talk to you, the talk is entitled So You Want to Be an Entrepreneur. The subtitle is an introduction from an experienced non-expert, and we'll explore why I say that during the talk. But today, what I'm going to talk about is just my ideas and experience on really the front end of forming your own company and stepping into that. I'm not going to talk about fundraising and a series of fundraising and how to do that, and definitely not going to talk about how you exit or sell your business. Both of those are there's much better people out there than myself to talk about those, even though I've had some experience in both areas. So I'm gonna. Can you see everybody see that change? I'm actually broadcasting from an office in desk chair. This is a startup.
Richard,
Uh, yeah.
me. I can't see your screen. I think you have not shared your PowerPoint.
Okay. Hang on a second. Interesting. How's that?
I'm not still getting it.
Okay. Give me just one moment.
So please.
We're gonna try this again. Always something, isn't there? Even though, yes, and believe it, folks, we practice this. this is this is as good as it's gonna get. Okay. How about now?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
That means I need to do one other thing.
Yeah, I think it's coming up. Yes, sir. You're good to go.
There we go. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Sorry for the delay. Okay, so I'm gonna continue on. Today I'm literally broadcasting this from this location in Loveland, Colorado. The reason I'm showing you this is a startup. A friend of mine bought the old bank building in Loveland and has totally refurbished it into a workspace. This building was originally built in 1927. And what I can tell you is that it's really his experience has been really unique. In some ways, in that he was a year late in getting it open and $1 million over budget. Also, really interesting, the entire crew that put together the construction and the design and the decoration of this building is an all-female crew. And he can say nothing but good things about his experience in developing this facility. But he started from ground up, new business, and actually it's doing pretty well. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about my experiences. We're going to cover some facts and myths and some statistics along the way. I'm going to end with just my personal advice to you. Uh, I hope I hope you really can take something away that there's value in this discussion today. I'm not going to tell you that I'm an absolute expert. I'm not. You know, and what you'll find is there really isn't any experts in startup. There's lots of people with opinions, lots of people with experience, and I encourage you to go out and talk to some of those people, and then integrate what they tell you for your own experience. I think we're pretty lucky because I'm hoping that most of the people listening to this are technical professionals or engineers. You guys and gals are already got a leg up in that. Your training teaches you how to think about stuff and critical thinking that it takes to be successful. Okay, so my here's my experience. I formed my first company when I was 12 with another gentleman named Dave Larson. We formed another one in high school, and that became a business for a couple of years. When we weren't in school, we were out earning money. And then basically, I went to work for a number of multinational corporations. My first uh, real job was with a company called Control Data, which has since downscaled to almost nothing. Motorola, who blew up a few years ago, and then I was recruited out of graduate school by Hewlett Packard, and that was a great experience. Hewlett Packard, this is before Carly, and it was probably one of the world's best training grounds for being a technical contributor or for being a manager. Um, I was an engineer for them for a number of years, R&D manager, quality manager, manufacturing manager, and then a general manager on two international businesses. I worked in mergers and acquisitions for Hewlett Packard, which taught me a lot. And the mergers and acquisitions that I worked on were principally international in Ireland, Scotland, and in Singapore. Because of that, I was named as the CEO of a company in Ireland, a startup. I worked there and then went on to Vision Research on the east coast of the US. And that's where I got the Oscar in 2012. I'm an investor in VisionGate of Chandler, Arizona, and I did some technical work for them on high speed optical links. I also bought a company in Pittsburgh, and we sold that 2 years ago successfully. And now I am a part owner of Virgin Products in Loveland, Colorado, and the CFO of a startup. So kind of a varied experience, but it's been really rewarding and a lot of fun, let me tell you. So we're going to go through just some myths that I've heard along the way and just talk about them. And this first one is one that I've heard a number of times, that you have to be brilliant to be an entrepreneur. No, you don't. You know, being smart doesn't hurt, but you don't have to be the smartest guy on the block. What you do need to do, and my advice is get some experience in industry. We find that about 10 or 11% of companies that are started up fail because the people really have underestimated the industry that they're going into and the knowledge they need to be successful. I also encourage people to get some management experience if they can. This is difficult to do. And if you could do multifunction management, that's even a better thing because you get an appreciation for not just design, but also for manufacturing. There's a really famous manager at Hewlett Packard named Dick Hackborn, went on to be part of the board of directors of the company for years, and he had a rule that any manager that worked for him had to be successful in more than one functional uh, area. So then also, you know, just get some business experience. You can get this volunteer. One of the jobs that I got, I went in and they weren't hiring. I told them, I said, I will work for you for 3 months for nothing. And at the end of 3 months, you can decide if you want to hire me or not. And I did. And they hired me. I had a great experience. The other thing is you can look for a mentor. Now be careful. A lot of people go into mentorships and they think it's a one-way street that the mentor should give them all kinds of stuff. It isn't. It's a two-way street. Good mentor relationships are two-way. You're providing something back to the mentor, and if nothing else, it's just a lot of appreciation for their time. So let's talk about the other myth that you have to be young to be an entrepreneur. I have there's a story that was written recently, and it painted this picture of the entrepreneur as a 20 or 30 something, hammering away on his laptop with visions of being the next Microsoft. Well, in this chart you can kind of see what the distribution of ages are that have gone out and started their own company. Um, of course, if you're young, you got lots of energy, and as you get older, sometimes family and other commitments don't give you a lot of time. But it's been found that about 45 years old is the age that people start their own companies. And if you look at that graph, there's people that are 70 and above that's that this is their first time that they started their own company. So don't be afraid, get out there. Um, Being young may give you the energy, but being experienced gives you a basis to make good judgments too. And if you look at that slide, the Census Bureau and MIT, how they ever got together is a miracle. But they looked at 2.7 million companies, and the average age of people that started those companies were 45 years old. So go for it. Okay, so elevator pitch. And there's this myth out there that all you need to do is have an elevator pitch, that the time that it takes the elevator to go from the 56th floor down to the ground level, um, is if you get that pitch, you're just going to be uh, have the key to success. Well, that's not really true. Uh, but let me tell you, doing an elevator pitch, a 3-minute pitch on what your company is, and how it's going to be unique and how it's going to win in a market is a really good way to focus on what you're doing. That that condensing your thoughts into that elevator pitch really gets you to focus on what's important to you and what you think is important to your customers. Um, VCs are interesting people. There's a friend of mine that says if you're not looking for $30 million or more, don't even bother a VC. Okay. Um, there are venture capitalists out there now that are doing seed funding and pre-seed funding and all kinds of stuff. But the big venture capitalists, they invest in 1% of the proposals they see in a year. 90% of those proposals they don't think are going to succeed. And so they place really big bets and hope to generate billions of dollars. The other thing that I have heard along the way is people have this idea that if they're working with a VC, that they're going to be sitting at the bar together just yucking it up about their successes and what they're going to do, and they're going to be best buddies. Well, guess what? VCs and PEs, personal equity investors, are interested in one thing: making money, and that's it. And and that's just remember that. Okay, I've worked for a company that was sold by a PE firm, and let me tell you, it was an absolute mess when we got there, and it took us about 3 years to straighten it out. Okay, you must have lots of money to start your own business. No, that's true. One of the businesses that we started was started on a loan from one of the owner's grandfathers. He really believed in his grandson and helped finance the startup with $20,000. That's what we started with. It grew into a multi-million dollar business, not a huge business, but a very successful small business, and we eventually did sell that to a international corporation. So it worked out really well for us, and very honestly, it was a lot of fun and a heck of a learning experience along the way. Let me tell you. About a third of new businesses start with less than $5,000. In Loveland, Colorado, we have an unusually high number of businesses that start here. It's about twice the national average for some reason, and but there's just a lot of small entrepreneurs starting businesses. One of them, locally here, recently went national with a product that they started in their home for their own family. Another one I think I just talked to the other day is going to do really well with a new makeup that they've come up with that is more akin to different skin tones than some of the stuff available today. If you look at the chart on the page, it says that most of the startup comes from personal savings. That has been my experience. My experience is it also comes from friends and family, mostly your relatives. And you have to be careful with that judgment because you don't want to offend your relatives along the way. And then also in this data, it said a bank loan. My experience hasn't been that bank loans uh, have been used a lot on startups, but they have been used a lot when you've got some collateral, some receivables or patents or whatever to be able to secure a loan from a bank. And banks have become very tough to get money out of if you've tried lately. Okay. Oh, this I found really interesting. And this graph really applies to people doing applications or uh, internet businesses. But the cost of launching has dropped in the last uh, 20 years drastically. Okay, if you look at that, they say that in 1999, it was about $5 million on average to launch a startup. And then basically it dropped in about 15 years, uh, or I'm sorry, about 6 years to 500,000, and then further dropped to about 50K. And they attribute this to open source software, the drop in owning hardware, or being able to use other hardware, and then cloud computing has dropped it even further. And actually, the study that this data came from said Amazon and their web services have been a major force in dropping the cost of a startup using the internet. Okay, this is the other thing that we face a lot. We get people that think that in a year or two, that's all it takes to do a startup. Okay. That's really not, this is something you got to really be aware of. And the quote up there is great. I mean, I remember somebody sitting there saying, "Oh, in 2 years, I'll have this app done, and I figure, I'll be able to afford my own Learjet." Well, let me tell you, owning a jet's like owning a boat. A boat is a hole in the water, basically, and a Learjet is a money sink. Your own jet, rent one for sure. But my own personal experience has been, Exactix, the company we had in Pittsburgh, took 8 years to get to the point where it was really viable, and we were able to sell it. It had enough value that someone else recognized that. Vision Gate, I think, is on its 16th year, and now just at a position where it can be sold um, or do an IPO. So if you're doing an app, the time is probably 4 to 6 years. I mean, that's what you're signing up for. If you're doing hardware, Think about a decade. If you're doing something that takes FDA approval, think about a decade or longer because the approval process is arduous and it is really, really hard to do. I like the quote at the bottom of the slide. Building a startup is an exercise in building a isn't an exercise in building a company. It's an emotional marathon that happens to revolve around business milestones. That's true, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But also, what I'm going to tell you is that yes, it is going to take time, and yes, it is a lot of work, and a bunch of you are going to fail along the way. And you're going to learn from your failures, and hopefully you can pick yourself up and do it again, because it also is really, really rewarding. You meet some really interesting people along the way, and you learn a lot about the business environment in America. Okay, and the other thing that we deal with a lot is people, I don't know if they get on the web and they read this, but basically they go out and they hire a CPA and an attorney and they rent an office like the one I'm sitting in here in Desk Chair in Loveland, Colorado. And you don't have to do that to start. Okay, probably the only thing is you get in contact with a lawyer that's had startup experience. So if you need him, he can review contracts, he can review documents for you and give you an opinion on it, an informed opinion. Otherwise, you start with a spreadsheet, and you don't need an office. You just need your home. Clear out a corner, put a desk in it, be able to hang a sign up so your kids don't interrupt you all the time, and off you go. It's a great place to start, and make sure you have a good internet connection. Here in Loveland community, in the Loveland community, this is a relatively small community of 70,000 people. It's wedged between Fort Collins and Boulder, and we suffer from bad internet here. Okay, one of the reasons I'm in this office today is they have a fiber link into a local provider here, and we get gigabit service. But also make sure you don't listen to late night TV. I can't believe this, but I know somebody that signed up with an invention firm that he saw on late night TV, and it was a disaster. Okay, there's lots of people that can help you. In Colorado, if you want to form an LLC, it is really easy, and the state encourages you to do it. They even had a sale a few years ago. I think it was $1 to sign up. It takes about 13 minutes to do so, and definitely as an engineer, you got the smarts to form it correctly. This is something that's really interesting. The top chart on this slide, we received our first orders. Easy street, here we come. No, the work just started. Okay, this is the top curve is from Gartner Research. Um, the hype cycle of new technology. We're going to talk about that in a minute, and there's all kinds of discussion about is it too long or too short or whatever. You can have that discussion, and then also the other one below is your adoption rate, and hopefully you've all read the book about crossing the chasm. It's a classic book, and do so because the chasm is when you go from early startup, when you have early adopters, to into the majority of people that are going to buy your product or service, and it is a huge change. Um, excuse me. One of the companies I work for, or was part of when the startups had lots of people that just loved their product, were early adopters of it because it was really unique, and it had all kinds of flaws. Okay, I mean, oh gosh, there was just all kinds of things, but they tolerated all that because they were they were just enthused by the technology. And then when we went into the greater market, those people or the people that were buying then wanted, hey, where's your support? Where's your repair process? I'm not, they weren't interested in products that had flaws, even though it had whizzy technology. And our sales dropped like a rock for a while. In fact, we got lots of stuff back. Uh, at one point, um, I think it was 66% of the products or 67% of the products we shipped came back. And we just had to mature really rapidly and fix the products because those people expected it more to look like a mature product than an early technological miracle. The other thing that I'm interested in is this top curve. Now, this is the hype cycle of technology adoption, but also what happens is your excitement kind of follows this curve too. You get your first order and it's, boy, I tell you, it's fantastic. You think you're on the top of the world, and then the second order doesn't come in for a while. And maybe you get some feedback that your product or your service that you're so enthusiastic about isn't as great as you think, and you kind of go into this slump. What do we do? Oh, and you really feel real down, and then you basically sit back and start working on it again, and you start gaining ground and gaining confidence in what you're doing. Okay, so I'm going to give you my advice. Take it for what it's worth, mix it with others, and see what you come up with. But this is basically from my experience. First thing is research your idea. Okay, talk with knowledgeable people. You don't have to give up the technical details of what you're doing if you're worried about somebody stealing it or something. But talk with people and tell your mother what you're doing, but don't take her opinion. You'd be surprised at the number of people that talk to their relatives. Your relatives are going to be kind to you, but search out some people that have enough knowledge to give you a good opinion. You could use your local business librarian. I do. Got an excellent one here. I read a lot. Google stuff. Look for things, but do your research and think about what you're trying to do, what you're proposing for a service or a product. Think about who'd be a great partner. There's a really good book out there. It's called The Power of Two. And it talks about successful corporations in the United States that have kind of had two people found them. One brought certain skills to the partnership. The other one brought another set of skills, hopefully complementary, and it worked out really really well. And this really works for me too. I really like people that bring skills that are definitely not as developed in myself, and they bring a lot to the startup. They really do, along with basically becoming pretty good friends along the way because you work a lot together. And make sure you don't clone yourself, okay? Because it doesn't get you anywhere. What you're looking for is somebody else that can get a different look at the plan. The diversity that you create is really powerful. Work on a business plan. Now, this is something that there's a colleague of mine that absolutely disagrees with this. And we fought about it for years. Not so much fought about it, but have different opinions on it. I think working on a business plan, it doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be fancy. I think the the vision in people's mind that the vision plans have to be an inch thick and have lots of diagrams and pictures and stuff in them, and they don't. What they do is it gives you a chance, in my view, to kind of coalesce your ideas and put them down. The act of writing them down really helps you coalesce your ideas. And so I encourage people to do this. It's going to be inaccurate. absolutely guarantee it. In 3 months, 6 months, or a year, you're going to look at it and go, whoa, you know, that might have been the start, but we've got to change. And the idea isn't that it's cast in stone or concrete, but it sets you off and it gives you the ability to get your ideas down concisely and also be able to communicate them to somebody else. So it's more of an exercise than it is creating a document. Get your team together, start with a partner, discuss your business thoroughly. You know, it was really interesting. The last company that I joined, there was a couple people that had gotten together and started. And then they asked me if I joined, and I did. I found their conversations really helpful because they had established norms of how they wanted to operate and who to do what, and they, you know, how they wanted to conduct their business, and they had developed a shared vision which they enrolled me in, and that really helped a lot. And I know people shy away from this, especially some of us technical folks, because oh, that's, you know, that's business stuff. We're technical people. And well, no, that discussion really helps form the group together. And when you get to a tight spot, when you have to make a decision on money or adding another member or something, a business direction, that discussion really helps a lot because it brings you together as a group rather than a bunch of individuals. Put your thoughts down on paper. How are you going to compensate people? Equity only? You're going to pay people? How are you going to pay them? You're going to raise money to do that? How are you going to keep track of members, partners' equity? So when it comes time to dissolve your business or sell it or do an IPO, you know how to divide the money that hopefully you're going to earn in doing that. Assign roles, discuss your exit strategy. This is something I had a discussion with a person at Hewlett Packard when we were buying businesses, because some of those businesses that we purchased turned out to be turkeys in the long run. And right up front, we'd say, okay, if this if this doesn't go, what are we going to do? How are we going to exit? How are we going to treat the people when we exit the business? And that's a good discussion, but it's a tough discussion to have. Who's going to invest is another thing. And then put your infrastructure together, get your accounting, think about how your tax regimen, talk to accountant. You don't have to hire them, just go talk to them for an hour and put your stuff together. Develop your contracts for the people that are going to start your business, um, and figure that stuff out. That's sort of the piping. You know, that's sort of the bulwark to make your new venture go. So this is just, you're going to know. Oops, there we go. You're going to know you're in trouble if you're talking to a private equity firm or a venture capitalist, and he or she says, we will strengthen your team. What that really means is they're going to replace somebody because they don't like you. I was at a presentation by a firm here in Denver a couple of weeks ago, and they had flown into Denver because they were interested in investing in new companies in the middle of America, I guess, instead of on the coast. And the one representative of this PE firm, who was like 2 years out of Swarthmore, stood up there and said, we will strengthen your team. And somebody asked, they said, well, of the hundreds of companies you've talked to, how many have you had to go in and strengthen their management team? And she said, oh, all of them. Well, sorry guys, they were just more interested in getting one of their own people in your team than they were the strengthening it. Okay. Also, if they say we aren't like those other investment firms, yes, they are. Don't believe that. They're not any different. If your startup team says, "Hey, we only need 1% of the market to be successful," how many times have you ever heard that? Oh my, that's no. You've got a bad view of the market. How could our competitor? I heard this from a company. How could our competitor charge that much for that product? I think I can make it for a lot less. I don't think you've done your homework because very few people out there are making huge, huge margins on stuff when they have adequate competition. Our competitors are so stupid. I've heard that from another gentleman. No, they aren't. You're not looking close enough if you think they're stupid. They may know something that you don't. Our company is going to be don't is not going to be like pick one. IBM, HP, Microsoft, the big multinationals. I think when I was working on the East Coast, I think I heard this every month from one of the people there that knew that I had a pedigree from Hewlett Packard. And what they were really saying is we didn't want to be like, we didn't want to be bureaucratic like one of these big companies or whatever. I'm not exactly sure. But one day I finally turned to him and said, "Oh, okay, so you don't want to be a multi-billion dollar camera?" "Oh, of course I want to be like that." Well, guys, those big companies do things right. There's a reason they got to be multi-billion dollar companies. Now, maybe they do things that drive you crazy or they're overly bureaucratic or stuff, but there's a lot to be learned in the way that they manage money, at the way that they manage inventory, at the way that they manage the strategy of product introduction. This is probably the worst one. Okay. I don't need to talk to customers. I know what they need. No, you got to get out and talk to people that are going to buy what you're what you're serving up. Make sure you do that. Don't rely on your own thoughts only. Get real data, talk to customers, and figure out what's of value to them. So closing comments. That's don't quit your day job. You know how many times I've said this to people that ask for advice? Don't quit your day job. The percentage of startup companies that actually fail is very large. Okay. And they fail, if you look back on the slides, they fail for a number of reasons: incompetence, lack of knowledge of the market, lack of opening their eyes and talking to customers. But keep your day job until you're actually seeing enough revenue to support yourself. Seek out help everywhere. There's people out there that are just dying to help you succeed. A lot of incubators, a lot of small business, uh, small governmental small business entities that have classes and stuff that you don't know about and will help you find people in the community that want to help you succeed, and they'll do it typically for nothing or a very small charge. There's a key for you. Okay. um, if they want to charge you lots of money, I'd look around again. Now this is one that we run into all the time, almost consistently, with people doing a startup, is they confuse marketing with sales, and they think that uh, they just don't differentiate the two. And a friend of mine does this really nice lecture on marketing. Uh, there's a misconception. Marketing doesn't mean advertising or sales. It means figuring out what your customer values, what they're willing to pay and what they're willing to pay for. And it's that front end research that really is the key to marketing. So this friend of mine talks about inbound and outbound marketing. Inbound is going out there and finding out the customer's desire, their needs, their values, and what they're willing to pay for. Outbound marketing is understanding where to advertise, how much, to whom, and what the message should be. Don't confuse the two. Okay. A great product isn't built on statistics, it's built on insights. Okay. And that's from one of the owners of Techstars here in Boulder. It's insights into the customer, their needs, and how you can get them to turn over money to you. And this is probably goes without saying. Understand how your product solves a customer's problem. Hardware and software products are vastly different. They are. Uh, I've worked almost consistently on hardware products in startups, and yes, they're very complex. They're very difficult to do, and they take a commitment and cash that exceeds typical software products. Know your financials backwards and forwards. This comes from a gentleman that I know that does risk loans for startups. You pay a little extra, but it's a nonprofit, so that it's actually affordable. But they invest when banks and others won't invest, and you should be able to sit down and explain your financials. Do not turn that ability over to a CPA or an accountant. Know them yourself. Know what creates value in your company and what costs are in your company. You probably already gained knowledge that I'm not real keen on VCs and private equity firms. They're not your buddies. They're people out there to make money. Hire others only when it becomes painful. This is something else that I have a friend that has a startup here in town, and he was lamenting the other day. Should I hire another person or two to do shipping? And it's like, why? Uh, well, I don't like doing shipping. Well, there's companies out there. There's a company in Loveland where you just take your product down to them and give it to them, and they take care of everything. They box it, ship it, find the shipper, the lowest cost shipper, the whole thing for you. Leverage that before you put an employee in place. I believe that putting an employee in place is a commitment to that individual that has to be taken really seriously, because they're going to rely on that job to pay their mortgage and feed their kids and whatever, and you have a responsibility to keep them employed. So don't take this lightly. If you meet a startup expert, run. There is no such thing. All startups are unique. What you need to do is talk to people. If somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, I can help you through the whole business cycle. I'm such an expert," run. They aren't. There is no such thing. It's up to you to integrate knowledge and advice from a number of people, um, and to, because probably what you're doing is relatively unique. Let's hope it has a unique element, because that makes it more valuable. Don't worry, think. Yeah, this is easier said than done. But if you're in a bind, think about how you're going to work out of it. Your engineer training as an engineer or a technical professional is really valuable in this, because you're taught to solve complex problems. And starting a business and some of the stuff you run into is really complex. Okay. And make certain you celebrate your small victories along the way. I remember talking to a guy starting a new business. And basically, what he said is, I'm not going to celebrate till I get my first order. Well, that may never come. And along the way, you learn a lot, and you got to have some fun. So, when you get your first prototype and it actually runs and doesn't blow up or do something, go out and have a beer together. Go out and, excuse me a second, go out and celebrate that victory that you got that prototype to work, because there's small victories along the way. Have fun with it. I mean, starting a company is a lot of work, but it also is an enjoyable experience. You meet interesting people, you create value, you learn a lot along the way. It's really a neat environment. that's my talk for today. I hope you've got something out of it. I really do. I encourage you to go in to starting your own business with a positive attitude. And I got one more thing. I hope you guys and gals out there are IEEE members. I got one more thing to ask you. One last thing. I have been on I have been on IEEE's. Uh, I'm a little bit of a critic of IEEE because I've been watching their literature for years, and it comes out and it doesn't mention customers or members enough, I believe. So my byline on all of my communications says IEEE is empowering members to advance technology for humanity. I believe that IEEE, without its members, without all the 32,000 volunteers, IEEE, that's what really powers the society. It isn't the headquarters. The headquarters is a skeleton that should make it viable for us as members to succeed. And so I'm a critic that way. IEEE is a terrific organization, has a terrific potential, but I do believe they need to pay more attention to their customers, i.e., their members. Anyway, that's it. Let's take questions, and I hope you have gotten something out of this today. Again, I want to encourage you to move forward uh, and uh, and have the experience of a lifetime.
Thank you, Richard. So we do have so many questions right out here shared with you on the Google Doc, just to make it easy.
Okay?
We might run out of time, so would you be okay to go maybe a little bit,
Oh, sure.
extra
Oh,
time
sure.
so that whoever who wants to listen to us can listen to the
Sure.
answers, and otherwise, of course, you are free to
I'll run out the door.
yes.
You'll be just silence all of a sudden. actually, actually today I've got my schedule is I got plenty of time this morning. We're here until noon, and then I'm going to work on my startup this afternoon.
Sounds like a very good plan. Okay, so the first question is from Lucian. He's a senior member of IEEE current treasurer for the Atlanta IAS chapter. He had quite a few questions. He's saying that he had started his own firm a couple of years ago, and his firm specializes in electrical power studies for industrial manufacturing and utilities.
Yeah.
He's saying that he's struggling reaching out to the right decision makers. So
Oh, yeah.
he is connected to two other organizations, the Chamber of Commerce and the Manufacturing Aliens of Georgia. So I guess he wants to know how he could, you know, break out of this and
So let me see if I understand the question. It's basically how do you how do you reach out to the decision makers of your customers?
I am not sure what he has written verbatim is I'm struggling in reaching out to the right decision makers.
Yeah, and that is hard. Getting into companies that, I mean, getting into companies is can be really difficult to find the right person that's going to sign the check, right? That's going to make the decision. In fact, if you go to sales seminars, they always tell you, you got to get to the person that's going to make the decision. Keep driving to find that. And my personal experience working for Hewlett Packard, we put up a huge bulwark that made it really tough to get to the guys that were going to sign the check. That we wanted it to come through our own channels. I don't know if I have really good advice for that. The Probably what I would do, and what I have done is I've done some networking. I've gone to networking events where I know people from that company are going to be at that event. Okay, and I make it a point to approach them, not to ask them for an order, but to start to develop a relationship with them. In fact, I just did this recently. There's a company locally here that trying to get trying to get to the right technical professional at a company is like cracking a safe. I mean, it's just so difficult. And then I saw that one of their officers was going to be speaking at this event. So I went to the event and sat there patiently until they were done, went up and introduced myself, gave him my card, and we started to talk about what he was interested in. And we formed a relationship so that at least I could now email him directly, um, and bypass about 3 levels of people to get to him. And I think it's gonna work out. But that would probably be my suggestion to do that. What you're trying to do is it is difficult, and companies make it difficult, and so you got to kind of find a way to get around it and make yourself known without being too obvious. Okay, what else you got?
So we got the next three questions from Mahesh Balasubramaniam. He asks his question. First two questions are, how do you differentiate between technical product based startup versus technical services based startup? Then he asks, if product based startup, how do you deal with product life cycles based on the lifespan of technology involved? And I'm going to add one last question. He wants to know about your insights on getting involved in projects like internal space station project.
Ooh, okay, the International Space Station. Um, I don't know. I could just tell you what my experience has been. I modified. I managed actually an engineering crew that modified a camera that went on the International Space Station. And I don't know if you've heard this, but I forget what the saying is that to put a 1 pound of something into space takes like 7 pounds of documentation or something on that order. Let me tell you, the documentation and the work offline to get that camera onto the International Space Station was absolutely enormous, and it was more daunting than working on the product. Okay. Um, anyway, so I don't know if there's an easy way. With international with projects like that, international projects, they tend to be really complex and really bureaucratic. Let's see. What was the other part of the question? Was product
He asked
versus.
he wants to differentiate between technical product based startup and technical services based startup. Then he wants to know about product life cycles based on the lifespan of technology
Okay.
involved.
Well, product life cycles are highly dependent on your customer, right? I mean, if you're dealing with the government, we had products where we guaranteed support for 10 years after we stopped selling them. So to get into that market, that's what you had to provide. Um, it takes a real special commitment to do that because components became obsolete, so we had to buy inventory in anticipation of usage, and then we had to make sure that our customer was on the hook for that inventory so that if they stopped buying, then they had to pay us for the inventory we were carrying for them. Um, on more commercial products, then you're sort of at the life cycle of the components you're using. And you're right. The components are becoming obsolete faster than they used to. So the good news is that a lot of times there are replacements for them, if not even direct replacements for them. But sometimes you're just left out in the cold. What you need to do is be proactive in talking to your customers and making sure that they're aware that you're not going to be able to support that product or that you're making a change in it so that they can adjust accordingly. Now, the difference between technical services and technical products, well, technical products, you're actually hopefully making something physical. And that comes with, it has to be safe. It has to have regulatory approval. It has to, it has to work. With services, services are a whole different ballgame. It's something that I don't have a lot of experiences with in just a service-based business. But I would guess the fundamentals would be the same as far as knowing your customer, creating value for them, and being really responsive. Okay, what else we got? I hope that helps.
Yes, so the next question is also from Mahesh. He is asking about getting management experience for a very experienced engineer who has been, I guess, on the tech, working on the technical front
Right.
all time, throughout his career.
Yeah. It's that, it's a very honestly, it's an easy thing to say, and it's a really difficult thing to do. Okay, but management experience, uh, part of it, you can get some leadership experience through IEEE, by taking on the role of a chairman of a society or a chairman of a section or something. That's part of it. Um, One of the ways that I got some management experience was I literally volunteered, okay, to take on uh, a minor management task at one of the multinationals that I was working with, and it gave me a chance to manage uh, the building of a new facility, or it was a new clean room, and and I learned a lot along the way, and so I got some experience of working with contractors, working with other people, and so it's you have to look for the opportunity. A friend of mine, believe it or not, went and got a job at Walmart, and his job at Walmart, I mean, he stood out, and they made him a manager of a whole section of the Walmart pretty quickly. And interestingly enough, his experiencing with managing people, from that, he references all the time when we talk about things. It was a real learning experience for him. So uh, I think you just have to look for the opportunities, make some yourself, and get some experience. You don't have to be a CEO or a C-level manager to get experience with uh, dealing with other people, communicating with other people, and managing people.
Hey, thank you, Richard. So, next question. How much of the research in recent times helps in product development?
In
How
product
development? And
uh,
how does an academic researcher know whether his research is worth getting into the development phase?
so from an academic uh, development to commercial, I think it's making the transition between academic and commercial.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, probably. One second. The cleaning crew has shown up here in the office. Okay. Well, okay. So from the academics I know, some of them have got super ideas. I mean, I would probably find what I would encourage them to do is find somebody that's working in the industry, hopefully along along something that is familiar with what they want to do. And then I'm sorry, I'm stumbling a little bit thinking here. Uh, and then talk to them about their idea. Is there a commercial, is there a commercial possibility of it? And talk to them uh, confidential, confidently. Don't give up your idea, but ask their opinion of, hey, do you think there's think this could be a viable product. I know locally here we've got an organization. It's called the Innosphere, uh, and it basically is a bunch of people that volunteer to be confidential, give confidential opinions and analysis of people's ideas for new business. So if I was an academic, I'd wander over there and say, "What do you guys think? Who have you got that will volunteer to listen to my idea and give some honest feedback on it?"
So IEEE has a IEEE an entrepreneurship initiative. It's a ad hoc committee. So
Yeah,
if you are, so if any one of you, of if you're facing that problem, you probably get a good bit of value by connecting to that initiative, to that ad hoc committee. So there's a big committee or community in IEEE right now working on entrepreneurship, and quite a few of them are from the academia. Now, if you want to, so there are a lot of people who have done it. For instance, in Region 3, there's GTRI where they create technology. So Dr. Deepak Diwan is a very famous guy who's doing this for the power industry. And there are a few researchers and professors who are involved in the entrepreneurship. So maybe following them and maybe listening to some webinars that might be out there in the future with them may
sure.
be of interest
Sure.
to this,
Don't rely on one source, you know.
sir.
Find a couple.
We have two last questions here.
Yeah,
And so there is Mehak Asik. He says he's from Region 10, IEEE Karachi section, Pakistan.
oh,
He's the
cool.
chair of the student branch. He's an undergrad working on specializing on biomedical engineering.
Ooh,
He wants
good.
to know how, so he says that that the typical career is to go for bachelor's, master's, PhD, and nobody out there in the academia wants to focus on startups. He says in this background how he can plan and make a startup rather than going for the traditional approach of master's, PhD, and life in university. Have any comments?
Well, I think so. So you're looking for going a commercial route instead of the academic route, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of what he's saying. Uh, well, if you've got some ideas, I would find personally, if I was in your stand, I would find a partner. I'd find somebody out there that would be a complement to my skills and interested in the area that you're interested in, and see if the two of you could get together and put together an idea, a business plan, and start out. You know, my experience has been that uh, academics don't necessarily make the best entrepreneurs. Uh, it's more engineers make really good entrepreneurs, to tell you the truth.
Okay, yes. So for this, I mean, I think the IEEE can be a really good resource because I don't know if you have seen this, Richard, but there is a big movement on entrepreneurship in IEEE right now. And if you go to, like, since he or she is in Region 10, if they go to the student young professional, they have a student young professional women in engineering congress there every 2 years. If they go there, they'll probably meet a lot of people who have similar experiences, or who have similar um,
That's a good suggestion. And the other thing is the young entrepreneurs put on a conference every year, which is a great place to network with people. Especially there's I would guess that there's a really good filter because they are IEEE members. that attend those. So you're talking to people that are uh, well educated, and it's a great place. That's a great suggestion.
Thank you. And additionally, in US, we have Rising Stars Conference happening in Vegas, January
Yeah,
2nd to 5th. So, any
yeah,
of you are interested, you can join us, join with the conference. So, I'll be going there too. Okay,
yeah.
so
That's yeah. Good suggestions. Wow.
yeah, so I think I missed one question. So, that brings us to two questions that
Okay.
I asked from you. So, the first is from Jay Sinnett. He says, I have a product with a manufacturing channel already set up, but breaking into mass market channels is hard. Please discuss licensing. It's a non electronic consumer product.
Yeah. So you want to license it?
Hmm.
I tell you, honestly, I don't. I don't have the kind of experience where I'd like to have in that area uh, to share with you. Only one of the things that I've worked on that we've actually considered licensing, and uh, we finally wound up not licensing it. So uh, I. I, yeah, I just don't feel comfortable with the kind of experience I've got to give you really good advice. Okay. But breaking into the mass marketing, I mean, you're basically probably talking about into distribution. Locally here, it'd be like getting your product into some of the big box stores or something. That is really difficult. Um, it is. They get lots of people showing up at their door. I know that for sure. Okay.
That brings us to our last question of this day, which is again from Lucian. His question is, I'm looking at getting a name tag. And he says, simple, right? On which side of the name tag should I put my company logo, and which side do I want my name? Do I want the person to remember the company or my name?
You want them to remember both. you know, put your logo next to your name and be proud of it.
Okay. Okay, Richard. So I guess that brings us to the end of all the questions that people were
Good.
asking from you.
Yeah. Well, again, you folks, I encourage you to move forward thoughtfully, uh, and with help from others. And the only thing I tell you is that one of the things that I've dealt with along the way is we run. In fact, I'll reflect on the startup, the newest one right here. Um, is we run into some really difficult times. I mean, when stuff just absolutely, it looked like a brick wall, like we weren't going to be successful, and you get really kind of down. And what I just give you the thing is that's natural, that happens. Step back, think about it, figure it out, and make another run at it. And that's what we've done. And so far, well, it looks like there's light at the end of the tunnel as far as the technology we're developing, and and I think we're going to be successful. I really do. After about 3 years of really hard work. Okay.
Thank you, Richard, for sharing your valuable experiences and ideas with us today. And I guess this is what IEEE is about. At least for me, it goes, some people tend to think that IEEE is the spectrum that you get, and maybe the meeting that you go to, which someone else organizes, or the conference that you get a discount for. But I think IEEE is about the community, the people who have really walked the talk and walked the path, and who has so much things to share and would be willing to, give out so freely, just like you are doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the people. Let's face it, it's the members, right?
Yeah.
Think about this. You and I have talked about this, I think, but think about it's kind of like reverse employment. How many people do you know you get to pay and then you go to work for the organization too? You volunteer. I've met some of the most interesting people through IEEE. I personally, and I work with students at Colorado State University, and I tell those students, I'll tell the listeners here, I think being part of being a professional, electronics or electrical engineer, is being part of being that professional is being part of IEEE. And I heartily encourage people to continue to be part of it, be active participants in the institute.
Thank you again, Richard. So once we are done, I will appreciate if you all could fill in the survey that will come up your screen once you end the WebEx session. So now we have come to the end of this webinar brought to you by IEEE Region 3. I thank you all for joining with us on a Saturday, and hope you'll join with us again on the last webinar of this series on 5th of December, which is a Thursday and on Eastern Time, which goes from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's on technical presentations. Hope
Good.
you will have a great day.
Thanks, Hasala.